Imagine this. You're standing in a quiet room, light pouring in through a cracked window, dust motes dancing like tiny specters in the air. Your breath catches as you notice the photograph on the mantelpiece there. Frozen in time is the smiling face of someone you trusted without question. You reach out, fingertips trembling, and the world wobbles for an instant. Why does something so simple feel as though it might fracture your very soul? You've always believed that truth is a solid foundation beneath your feet, yet right now, you feel the ground shifting, as if reality itself has betrayed you. What if everything you thought you knew about a person, a promise, or even yourself was built on whispered lies and hidden agendas? How do you reconcile the face staring back at you with the knowledge that it has been a mask all along? The paradox is unbearable. We cling to certainties, to the comforting illusion that honesty reigns supreme in our relationships and society. But what if that illusion is the greatest lie of all? How many moments have slipped by, unnoticed, when deception crawled between the cracks of our daily lives? How many truths have we accepted without question, simply because they fit snugly into the narrative we wanted to believe? Your heart pounds as the emotional tension coils tighter. Betrayal isn't merely the fracture of trust. It's an existential earthquake that raises the familiar landmarks of your inner world. Suddenly, your memories feel suspect. Was that laughter genuine? Those words of comfort, were they ever meant for you? Or were they part of a carefully rehearsed performance? And here's the strangest question of all. If those moments were false, what remains of you? Consider the weight of that realization. When the pillars of your reality crack, what prevents you from plummeting into the abyss of self-doubt? How do you navigate a landscape where every shadow might conceal a lie, and every mirror distorts more than it reveals? The moment you see through the facade, you're forced to confront an urgent question. Is ignorance bliss, or is it a prison? You may want to turn away, to seal your eyelids, and pretend the cracks will vanish. Yet deep down, you know that awareness is the only path forward, however painful. To live in ignorance is to sleepwalk through existence. To wake is to face the possibility that the world is not as it seems. What choice do you really have when the truth beckons, relentless and unyielding? This is the hinge on which your story turns a point of no return. Once you acknowledge the lie, you can never unsee it. The question looms: will you accept the comforting lie or embrace the jarring reality? And if you choose reality, how do you begin the arduous task of rebuilding? But perhaps the most unsettling thought of all is this: maybe the lie was not in the other person, but in yourself. What if you, too, have been complicit, burying inconvenient truths, tailoring facts to suit your desires, weaving narratives that protect your ego? If the act of self-deception is as potent as the deceit of others, then the moment of awakening becomes even more daunting. Where do you draw the line between innocent self-preservation and a betrayal of your own integrity? Your pulse quickens as the stakes become clear. This isn't a mere story of deception. It's a confrontation with the very essence of human perception. And at the edge of that confrontation lies a single, terrible secret. Once you realize you've been lied to, nothing will ever feel certain again. Yet, in the heart of this existential storm, there is a spark of possibility. The breach of trust can become the birthplace of transformation. You stand at the precipice, caught between the familiar comfort of willful blindness and the exhilarating terror of absolute clarity. Which path will you choose? As the last sliver of light shifts, you sense that this is not the end, but the beginning of a deeper journey, one that will plunge into the hidden roots of deception, its far-reaching consequences, and the radical rebellion required to reclaim your truth. And so, you take a single, trembling step forward into the unknown. As you step into this newfound awareness, you begin to sense the hidden machinery that has been humming beneath the surface of your consciousness. You might imagine that lies arise solely from malicious intent deceivers lurking in the shadows, consciously weaving webs to ensnare the unwary. Yet the truth is far more unsettling. Much of the deception you experience and even perpetrate originates not from conscious calculation, but from the deepest recesses of your psyche, guided by ancient philosophical currents and modern psychological forces beyond your immediate control. Consider Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, the collection of traits and impulses you refuse to acknowledge, banishing them to the dark corners of your mind. In hiding these aspects, you also create fertile ground for self. Can you trust the portraits you paint of yourself when half the canvas is hidden? Every time you dismiss uncomfortable feelings, envy, shamu, Allow these emotions to whisper in secrecy, shaping your perceptions without your consent. When someone deceives you, are they not exploiting the very shadow you refuse to confront? Friedrich Nietzsche warned of the will to power, the innate drive that compels you to assert your version of reality. Nietzsche's insight suggests that truth is often subordinate to your desire for dominance, whether over others or over your own. Have you ever twisted a fact to preserve your sense of superiority? Have you ever believed a flattering rumor because it fed your ego? The paradox is that you cloak these manipulations in the language of honesty, convinced that selective blindness is somehow justified. Jean-Paul Sartre introduced the notion of bad faith, in which you lie to yourself to avoid the anguish of true freedom. If every choice you make defines you, then acknowledging the full scope of your freedom and responsibility can be painful. Might it be easier, in the moment you feel most vulnerable, to adopt convenient falsehoods? I had no choice, they made me do it, and thus evade the terror of autonomy. In those moments, dishonesty becomes a refuge, a psychological anesthetic against the rawness of existence. Arthur Schopenhauer's bleak vision of the will as the root of suffering casts another light on deception. According to him, your ceaseless desires propel you into a cycle of longing and disappointment. To short-circuit the pain, you fabricate illusions. This promise will finally bring me happiness. Yet once the promise is exposed as empty, the disillusionment cuts deeper precisely because it was so eagerly anticipated. Have you ever clung to a dream only to discover that its collapse felt like the death of hope itself? Aldous Huxley, in his dystopian sketches, foresaw societies numbed by soothing lies, manufactured distractions that maintain order at the expense of genuine consciousness. Today, the siren call of social validation, viral narratives, and algorithmic echo chambers serenades you into complacency. Can you distinguish what you have chosen to believe from what you have been coaxed into accepting? When every headline, every social post, reinforces a curated version of reality, the line between collective fantasy and objective truth blurs into a seamless haze. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, found that meaning even in the darkest hours depends on confronting reality, not evading it. He argued that suffering unaddressed festers into despair, whereas an honest appraisal of your circumstances can catalyze resilience. Have you ever hesitated to face a painful truth about your relationships, your failures, your mortality, because you feared the void that acknowledging it might reveal? What cost do you pay, day after day, for that fleeting comfort of denial? The psychological forces at play: confirmation bias, selective memory, cognitive dissonance act like invisible puppeteers, tugging you toward conclusions that preserve your self-image or soothe your anxieties. When you encounter evidence that contradicts your beliefs, does your mind leap to retrieve justifications, however flimsy? Do you remember praise more readily than criticism, reinforcing an unbalanced narrative of each of these biases quietly entrenches the lies you tell yourself, making you vulnerable to similar falsehoods from others. Societally, the problem multiplies. Culture rewards confidence over humility, certainty over inquiry. From childhood, you are groomed to affirm dominant narratives about success, morality, belonging often at the expense of nuance. Have you ever sensed an inner tug toward a contrarian truth, only to stifle it for fear of ostracism? How many authentic thoughts have you buried beneath the weight of social expectation? Now, as the hidden roots of deception unravel, you realize that the moment of awakening was not just about uncovering an external lie, but about exposing the very architecture of your mind. The paradox deepens. To outwit the deceiver, you must first outwit yourself. Yet how do you dismantle structures so ingrained, so invisible that they seem like the very air you breathe? The tension escalates, because beneath these psychological and philosophical foundations lies an even darker current, an almost biological imperative to preserve equilibrium, to avoid the trauma of upheaval. In this inner battleground, truth can feel like a saboteur, threatening the status quo of your identity. Are you prepared for the reckoning that comes when every cushion of self-comfort is torn away? Ahead lies a confrontation with consequences. The ways in which these hidden forces have shaped not just your mind, but your relationships, your society, your world. How many lives have been quietly molded by the lies you believed, the lies you told, and the lies you ignored? The stakes are no longer hypothetical. The fissures are widening, and soon they will reshape every aspect of your existence. Yet within this peril lies a flicker of hope. If you can map the terrain of your own self-deception, you stand at the threshold of genuine freedom, a chance to rebuild on foundations of radical honesty. But first, you must dare to peer into the abyss that these hidden roots have carved beneath your feet. And so, you steel yourself for the journey ahead, aware that the deeper you delve into the unseen consequences of deception, the more your world will tremble and the closer you will come to a revelation that cannot be unlearned. You step into the shadowed corridors of your own experience, the echoes of half-truths reverberating against the walls of your perception. At first, the lies you uncover seem like isolated cracks, an innocuous omission here, a white lie there, but as you follow their hidden pathways, you discover a labyrinth of consequences that has been quietly reshaping your life and the world around you. Consider the moment you met someone new, and they smiled with practiced ease. You believed them kind. Later, you learn that kindness was a performance tailored to extract trust. That single deception ripples outward. You question every friendly gesture since, wondering if it was ever genuine, and that suspicion seeps into your future connections, making you more guarded, less open. A lie that began as a social lubricant becomes a corrosive acid, eating away at your capacity for intimacy. This pattern repeats at every level. In your mind, cognitive biases amplify the impact of deception. Confirmation bias fans the flames of your doubts. You notice every inconsistency, every hesitating glance, while discarding the countless moments of sincerity that might restore your equilibrium. Your brain, wired to protect you, becomes a revenge seeker, hunting for evidence that reinforces your newfound cynicism. As the distortions accumulate, your ability to trust even in yourself neurologically, your amygdala, a sentinel of threat detection, has gone on high alert. Once an infrequent sentinel, it now patrols every encounter, sounding alarms at the faintest hint of falsehood. Your baseline stress levels rise. Small ambiguities trigger fight-or-flight cascades. Adrenaline surges. Your heart races at casual remarks you used to take in stride. The world grows tense, the air thick with potential betrayals. Simple conversations feel like minefields, and you find yourself retreating, avoiding situations that might spark that familiar adrenaline spike. On a cultural scale, the consequences are no less dramatic. You live in a society that venerates the image of success, glossy social feeds brimming with achievements and happy faces. You assume those images are truthful, until you learn of the filters and photo edits, the rehearsed poses and curated captions. That revelation shatters more than your faith in social media. It undermines your own sense of self. You question your accomplishments. Were they earned, or merely chosen for the highlight reel? Each like, each comment, carries the weight of potential and authenticity. And what of institutions, governments, media outlets, corporations that claim to serve your interests? When a scandal breaks, when hidden agendas surface, you feel betrayed, not just as an individual but as a citizen. That collective breach of trust seeps into your civic identity. You begin to wonder whether any institution can be trusted, whether truth itself has been commodified, packaged, and sold back to you in bite-sized, pre-digested fragments, the social contract phrase, leaving you adrift in a sea of skepticism. But perhaps the most insidious consequence is how deception rewrites your internal narrative. You've told yourself stories about who you are: loyal friend, diligent worker, compassionate partner. Each story has been punctuated by moments when you believed in simple truths. Now, confronted with the duplicity woven through those moments, you scramble to rewrite your personal history. Did you ever genuinely help someone, or was it another performance? Were you truly happy, or merely playing the part? The more you question, the thinner your identity feels, like a book whose pages dissolve at each touch. This fracturing of self travels downstream into your relationships. Conversations become guarded duels of half-revelation. You offer only what you deem safe, keeping your true thoughts locked behind an unbreachable door. Intimacy wanes, as though a protective dam has sprung up between you and the world. Love, once a soaring current, slows to a trickle, impeded by the debris of your mistrust. You crave genuine connection, yet every effort to reach out is shadowed by the fear that the other side is, once more, a stage. You may ask, is there any way back from this? Is it possible to heal the wounds that deception inflicts? Before you can seek repair, you must first confront the full scope of the damage, and that requires acknowledging not only the lies you've endured, But the lies you've told, those small half-truths you justified as necessary, the omissions you whispered to keep the peace, the distortions you employed to protect yourself, in admitting your own complicity, you face a profound choice. Continue down this path of mutual suspicion, or forge a new covenant with truth. But the dangers are real. Radical honesty can shatter relationships that depend on convenient illusions. It can leave you vulnerable, exposed to wounds you once thought concealed. Yet without it, the labyrinth of deception will continue to twist inward, tightening its grip until you can neither trust others nor trust yourself. Look around. The world teeters on the edge of a trust collapse. Communities fracture, polarized by competing narratives, each convinced the other is the deceiver. The digital realm magnifies these schisms, algorithmically segregating you into echo chambers of confirmation. Every click seals another brick in the wall, separating you from an outside reality. The unseen consequences of deception are thus not just personal, they are the fault lines along which our collective future will break. Feel the urgency of this moment. The cost of inaction is not mere discomfort, but a descent into isolation, despair, and the loss of meaning. When you wake each morning, you drag the weight of mistrust into every thought, every decision. Joy becomes tentative, fear becomes default, and the bright promise of human connection flickers like a candle in a storm. Yet within this darkness lies the fragile ember of possibility. For if you can see the labyrinth for what it is, if you can trace each thread of deceit back to its origin, then you hold the key to dismantling the walls it has built. But first, you must steel yourself for the reckoning to come. A confrontation not only with the deceivers around you, but with the deceiver within. Only then can you prepare to challenge the deception, his final dominion, and discover the path that leads beyond its shadows. You awaken in the depths of the labyrinth, heart pounding, sweat beating at your temples. The walls of illusion shiver around you, and the air is thick with the echoes of every unspoken half-truth you've ever harbored. Yet here at the very heart of deception you feel something else stirring, a flicker of defiance, a sudden clarity that whispers the impossible. You can rise above this web. This is the moment of rebellion. What if the greatest act of courage is not to conceal, but to reveal? Picture historical insurgents of truth. Galileo, standing before the Inquisition, forcing the heavens to bend to the facts. Rosa Parks, refusing to yield her seat to a lie that said some lives matter less. Nelson Mandela, unbowed by decades of imprisonment, insisting on reconciliation over retribution. These were not polite negotiators of comfort, but radical truth-tellers who shattered the comfortable illusions of their times. They teach you that breaking free requires not incremental compromise, but a complete inversion of the prevailing narrative. First, you must cultivate what the philosophers call radical self-honesty. More than mere confession, it demands daily interrogation of every thought, every motive. Begin each morning by asking, what self-deception do I cling to for safety? What convenient story am I feeding myself under the guise of self-care? When you notice the familiar tug of denial, it wasn't that bad, I don't really care. Stop, sit with the discomfort, name the feeling, call the bluff of your own mind. Like a muscle, self-honesty grows stronger when you subject it to ever greater resistance. Second, adopt the practice of public vulnerability. In a society that equates vulnerability with weakness, choose instead to display your wounds as badges of humanity. Share your doubts aloud, not to elicit sympathy, but to dissolve the myth of omniscience. When you voice a fear or admit a mistake, you fracture the illusion that perfection is the currency of worth. Others, watching your defiance, are emboldened to follow suit. Vulnerability, once weaponized against you, becomes a rallying cry for communal authenticity. Third, you must dismantle the echo chambers of your mind. Seek out perspectives that frighten Ayato's articles, conversations, or friends whose views gnaw at your certainties. When a new idea strikes discordant, resist the reflex to block it. Instead, lean in, ask questions, explore its merits and flaws. By deliberately courting cognitive dissonance, you train your mind to tolerate uncertainty, to see complexity not as an enemy, but as the raw material of wisdom. Fourth, reclaim your narrative authority. You are not a passive recipient of other people's stories. You are the author of your own life. Write journals, sketch mind maps of your beliefs, and trace their origins. Examine each chapter for authorship. Which pressures, social, familial, cultura shaped this passage, which external voice dictated its tone. Then, with pen in hand, rewrite the scenes that ring false. Transform yourself from character into storyteller, from actor into playwright. Fifth, practice what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Rather than shielding yourself from pain by burying all memory of past betrayals, revisit them deliberately. Imagine the worst-case scenario: the trust shattered, the heart broken, the bridge burned. Experience the sting in a controlled way. When the real moment of betrayal, it will feel less like an ambush and more like a challenge you've already met and overcome. In embracing the potential for pain, you rob deception of its power to seize you unawares. Sixth, build alliances of accountability. Find companions who share your quest for truth and establish practices of mutual challenge. One friend calls you out on your rationalizations, another demands evidence for your assertions. Together, you become each other's truth gatekeepers, a collective immune system against the spread of lies. Nothing fortifies you like standing in solidarity with others committed to radical Finally, turn your rebellion outward. In every conversation, every decision, ask, what is the truth here, unvarnished? How can I speak plainly, even if my words bruise? How can I act with integrity, even if it costs me comfort or popularity? Let each interaction become an experiment in authenticity. Notice how your clarity startles others. Some will recoil, others will lean in. Each moment of honest action widens the fissure in the walls of deception. As you enact these counterintuitive practices, you begin to feel an inner alchemy. The weight of doubt lifts, and your perceptions sharpen. The paradox you once feared, that radical honesty might leave you naked and vulnerable, reveals itself as the greatest shield. For when you have nothing left to hide, no lie left to uphold, you become unassailable. The amygdala's alarm quiets. The brain, re-educated in the currency of truth, finds a new equilibrium in clear sight. Around you, the labyrinth trembles. Walls that once seemed impenetrable crack under the pressure of your rebellion. Doors appear where none existed, corridors a possibility you could not have imagined. Each lie you dismantle releases energy, creativity, connection, compassion that had long been trapped in the cellars of your psyche. And yet, this is only the overture. Ahead lies the final confrontation with the ultimate truth, the revelation that will reforge your world entirely. But for now, feel the surge of power that courses through you as you reclaim the narrative of your life. Feel the solidarity with every truth seeker who has dared to break free before you. Feel the exhilaration of revolutionary rebellion, not against others, but against the tyrant of deception itself. You are no longer a passive witness to lies. You have become their liberator. And from this vantage, the path to the ultimate revelation emerges dazzling, terrifying, and wholly within your grasp. You stand at the edge of a vast chasm, a yawning void carved by every lie you've encountered, every self-deception you've uncovered. Below, shadows swirl with memories of broken promises, fractured trust, and the ache of discovery. Above, a pale light beckons, the final threshold between the world as you knew it and a reality transformed by unflinching clarity. This is the moment of your ultimate revelation. Ask yourself, what if the lie you chased through every corridor, the falsehood you exposed in others and in yourself, was never about someone else's words, but about the illusion of separation? What if the deepest betrayal is the belief that you exist as an isolated self, distinct from the web of life, cut off, autonomous, invulnerable? Every deception reinforces the myth of a solitary you, shielding the terror that your true nature is boundless, intertwined with other minds, other beings, the very fabric of existence. Here lies the paradox that Nietzsche, Jung, Huxley, and Frankl foreshadowed in their own ways. The moment you think you have discovered the ultimate truth, you risk imprisoning yourself in yet another dogma. Genuine illumination dissolves the final barrier between knower and known, subject and object. The ultimate revelation isn't a new fact to add to your mental library. It is the collapse of the library itself, the recognition that the stories you've catalogued about you and them, truth and lie, are provisional maps, not the territory. Feel the ground tremble beneath you as this realization washes over your mind. The chasm's shadows flicker and recede, revealing that the void is not empty, but filled with the collective breath of all that is. Every whispered lie, every suppressed desire, every hidden fear, they are threads in a vast tapestry that includes you. The very act of believing you were separate was the greatest deception of all, the one that set every other in motion. In this light, lies and truths lose their binary opposition. They become notes in an ever-shifting symphony, each necessary to the whole. A lie can guide you toward clarity by showing you what you're unwilling to see. A truth can become a cage if you cling to it too tightly. The ultimate freedom lies in embracing the fluid dance between them, recognizing that reality is not a static fortress but a living, breathing interplay of perspectives. This is the revelation Viktor Frankl hinted at when he spoke of finding meaning in suffering, how the darkness becomes a canvas on which the self and the world co-create significance. It is the insight Jung touched when he urged you to acknowledge your shadow, to integrate it rather than banish it. It is the vision Huxley urged you to cultivate when he imagined minds expanded beyond societal conditioning. And it is the challenge Nietzsche laid down, to become the artist of your own values, to sculpt your identity from the molten uncertainties of existence. You may ask, what does this mean for your daily life? How do you live within a reality where even truth is mutable? It begins with presence, the willingness to witness each moment without preconceived narratives. In conversation, listen not to respond but to dissolve the barrier between speaker and listener. In decisions, act not from fixed convictions but from an openness to the intelligence of the moment. In suffering, let pain reveal the contours of your empathy, the threads that bind you to every other being who has ever felt loss. By inhabiting this fluid reality, you cultivate what some spiritual traditions call beginner's mind, the state of perpetual openness, where each experience is fresh and each perception unfiltered by habit. The landscape of life unfolds like an endless horizon, not confined by the walls of prior beliefs. You become a perpetual explorer, charting the ever-changing topography of existence with humility and curiosity. And in this state, you discover perhaps the most radical truth of all, that every lie you have uncovered, every deception you have endured or perpetrated, was a signpost pointing toward this realization. They were not obstacles but milestones, guiding you through the labyrinth toward the center and beyond, into the boundless expanse where no maps can reach. Feel your chest expand as the pale light above the chasm intensifies. You are no longer weighed down by the accumulation of lies or the fear of being deceived. You have stepped beyond the dichotomy of truth and falsehood, into a realm where the dance of shadows and light co-creates the tapestry of reality. Here, you are free not because you have conquered deception, but because you have transcended the very framework that gives deception its power. In the final, cinematic sweep of this awakening, you recognize that your journey was never about finding impregnable certainties, but about embracing the magnificent uncertainty at the heart of being. You are both architect and inhabitant of a reality that forever in that unfolding, you find the pulse of creativity, the echo of connection, and the infinite potential of presence. So step forward, not toward a new destination, but into the ever-present moment, where the ultimate truth is lived, not known. Let your life become the living paradox, at once fragile and resilient, bounded and boundless, fleeting and eternal. And as you move, feel the legacy of every lie transform into the launchpad of your liberation. This is your final revelation. That reality is not a ledger of facts to be balanced, but a symphony to be danced. So, dance